can see in this image here, Fort Sumter from the sandbar. They are basically along the coast where South Carolina was shooting at Fort Sumter. It's not just damage that you see on there. Fort Sumter was never actually finished. Okay? But again, it's within South Carolina's territory, so when they seceded, they wanted to take it with them. So some of the statistics. Okay, clearly, there's a lot more people that die in the north. The casualties are about the same. Okay? Why do you think casualties are about the same? Like in the red, why do you think those are the same for both the north and the south? And considering how many more people served in the north, you think more northerners would die. Yeah?
Because the southern data was destroyed.
Okay, that could be part of it. What else did we talk about yesterday? What did the north have, the south did not? The south smuggled in things like dolls and other stuff like that. Jewel? Medicine. Okay? The north is going to have a sanitary commission, and while it's still horrible, it's still a little bit better than the south. So a lot of those wounded are just, and hurt, that wind up dying, are really just because of the lack of medicine. Both the Union and the Confederacy are going to have to resort to conscription. Okay? What is conscription? It's a draft. Okay? And you can see the Union has about an extra year versus the Confederacy that has to start soon after the war begins. Okay? By 1862, they have to have a draft. The draft, though, it doesn't really use that often. You wind up getting more and more volunteers as the war goes on because people become more and more invested in fighting. Okay. So for this slide, I suggest taking out your phones and taking a picture of it. I would never test you on this or really ask you anything about this. However, it will help when you are researching, okay, to understand the difference between an army, a corps, and things like that. Okay? If you take a picture of it, then I will explain it. Okay? But you don't have to write this whole thing down. So at the very bottom was a company. Okay? In a company, there's 100 men, and normally it was people from the same area. Okay? A company was then organized. They picked their own officers. They're going to elect a captain and then a lieutenant. Okay? And normally they had a corporal also. It doesn't necessarily line up. This is just the lowest going all the way up. So if you're reading and it talks about a private, that's just a normal, regular foot soldier. Okay? And as you go up, you become more important. So all the way at the top would be a general. Okay? So 10 companies. If there's 100 people in each company, how many people? Okay, there's 10 companies, 100 people in each, 1,000, right? So each regiment had 1,000 people in it. Okay? A regiment is a lot bigger. It's 1,000 people. It's normally named after the state, so it would be like 54th Massachusetts Regiment, and the governor would pick the people in charge of that one. Okay? A regiment then, you take 4 more of those and you wind up with a brigade. Okay? A brigade then, 3 or more brigades makes up a division. 2 or more divisions added together makes up a corps. 2 or more corps added together makes up an entire army. Okay? Again, just keeping those different terms in mind. Okay? You definitely need to know what a company is though. That will be important. That will come up a lot. The term regiment will come up also a lot, and so will army. The other ones you will not see as much. Okay? There can be multiple armies. So you can have the Army of the Potomac, which is going to fight over by Richmond, and you'll also have the army that's more out west. Okay, that's just for the Union. Towards the end, once their front becomes more organized and more focused, because they're ending the Civil War, you will have just one army that's all commanded by Grant. Yeah?
So the blue triangle is a company? Like the breakdown inside the company?
It's just a breakdown of, that's not necessarily within a company, it's within the whole, like everywhere. So That's just like if you are reading about like a lieutenant, just know that they're below a general. That sort of thing. Okay, so it goes up in order of their importance. It's like a corporal is above a private, like that. Okay. So Lincoln, as I mentioned yesterday, has a massive problem finding a general. Okay, who did he go to first? Robert E. Lee. Perfect. Okay, and Robert E. Lee, who's from Virginia, what does he tell Lincoln? No. Okay, and who does he go and be? Who is he the general for instead? The Confederacy. Perfect. Okay. So Lincoln's left scrambling, basically looking for somebody. So he goes to Winfield Scott. What war was Winfield Scott already the general of? Yes. Mexican American. Okay, he was at the very, very end. He's very old at this point. And he comes up with the Anaconda Plan, which, as I've mentioned, you will be looking up. Okay? And the very first battle that he's involved in is the Battle of Bull Run. It ends horribly. He tells the field commander, McDowell, to take his troops over near Washington, D.C. And McDowell says, I don't think they're ready. They're not trained. They don't know what they're doing. They've never shot a gun before. They ignore him. They go through the battle, and it's an absolute disaster for the Union. So Lincoln fires both, okay? Both Scott and McDowell. Then we have McClellan. McClellan, there we go. He's the most important, besides Grant, which we'll get to. He's going to be hired, then fired, then hired, then fired, all the way till the end until he's officially fired. He is very intelligent, and he's very good at planning. However, he has an obsession with believing that the other side has tons more troops than they do. So every time that he can pursue the Confederacy, he gets scared and he says, no, we can't do that, and he retreats. Okay? This puts the Union in a bad spot many times because he truly believes this each time. He's being basically too cautious. So McClellan is punished, and he's told to join in with Burnside, where we do get the nickname Sideburns from. Okay, it's from his face. Okay. Burnside does horribly, and he's replaced by Joseph Hooker, okay, who likes to party and drink and doesn't have time for actually focusing on the army, so he's fired. Then we have Meade, okay, who's going to do poorly, and McClellan is put back. Okay? So you can see Lincoln's really scrambling. He's constantly trying to find new people. And all of these are all over in the west, or the east. These are all over by Richmond. In the west, he has a lot better luck with that army. Okay? He puts Grant in charge of the west. Grant is able to gain control of the entire Mississippi River. And then by 1864, as a reward for doing so well, Grant is put in charge of the entire U.S. Army. Okay? And he's going to be the general that's going to end the war. You can see some images here where we talked about photography being new in this war. Here's a picture of Burnside reading a newspaper, okay, planning in the camp. Here's another one, Union headquarters, okay, of the Army of Potomac. Like I mentioned, right, an army is more talking about the size of and all those different parts that are within it, right, made up of corps and regiments and all of that. The Army of Potomac was the one that was in charge of fighting near Richmond, right, and they're eventually absorbed and controlled by Grant as well. Okay. Now Davis is going to have a lot better luck. This is one of the South's biggest advantages, that a lot of their generals are very experienced, are very innovative, and really are the best. Okay? We have Stonewall Jackson, and that's his nickname. Okay? You're going to see why he's nicknamed that. And as I mentioned yesterday, Stonewall Jackson is killed by friendly fire. His troops shoot him in the arm, thinking he's the enemy. He winds up having an amputation. And as we also saw yesterday, he winds up dying from the amputation. Right? He's one of the best generals, and this is a huge blow to the Confederacy. They've killed Stonewall Jackson, their own man. Okay? Some of the other important people that you should, they're not like on your required list of people, but if you're explaining the battles, these names should come up. Okay? Pickett is going to be in charge for Gettysburg, okay, and Bull Run, Longstreet, Forrest, and Stewart. Right? There's a couple of others, but these are kind of the major ones you'll see over and over again. And most important is who? Robert E. Lee. Okay. And I'll leave that up there for a second so you guys can copy it down. And Robert E. Lee is his most important general. Okay, so who fought? The average age was 16 to 23, and you really signed up because it was like what your family was doing. It was what your friends were doing. It was really a source of pride. You were looked down upon if everybody else around you signed up and you didn't. That's why even when they have the draft, still people are volunteering. Right? You'll also see there's still some people who are under 16 that sign up. They lie about their age, and they fight. Okay? And like I said, over 70% were in that young age range. Okay? So what that means is that young generation is completely decimated. Okay? Most of the deaths, right, 620,000, they're coming from that age. There were nicknames for each other that were derogatory. The Rebs, referring to who? The Confederates, and the Yankees, referring to the North. So who fought? So even though there was conscription, meaning a draft, you had a couple of ways of getting out of it. Okay? One, you could pay for a substitute, okay? But who's really the only people who could afford that? Rich. Okay? You also, it was something called a commutation fee. You could pay a flat $300 to the government to get out of your draft spot as well. Also, who's the only one who can afford to pay that? The rich. Okay? So there's going to be draft riots because people are angry over that. And some people are rich enough to be able to buy their way out. Okay? Even worse, in the South, you have something called the 20 Negro Law, which said if you had 20 slaves, you did not have to fight. You were exempt from the draft. Who would that anger? Poor farmers, okay? Right, also, a lot of people are going to point at the plantation owners as the reason they're fighting. And here they are, right, saying, well, we have to be back home, we're making cotton, we're fueling the war effort that way. Yeah?
So it's not like they send the slaves to fight, it's just if you have 20, you don't have to fight.
Correct, exactly. They would not send slaves to fight. Really on both sides, also in the Union, they really believed that African Americans would just run away in battle and that they were not reliant. Remember, they looked at them as inferior, so they felt they could not be trusted to fight. So the last thing we're going to look at is why did they fight? Okay, so first we'll just talk about the North, because that's a little bit easier to think about. Why is the North fighting? Yeah.
Because they believe that the South is committing treason by the Union.
Okay, good. So, right, some people look at it as treason, but why didn't people sign up in floods at first when the Confederacy was formed? What's the catalyst that gets all those volunteers? Good, Fort Sumter. Okay, they feel like we have been attacked, right? We were trying to solve this peacefully, and yet again you have the Confederacy that's not only illegally formed a country, now they've attacked our people, and we have to fight back. We have to regain the Union. Okay? So most people, when they're talking about fighting, they talk about these ideals, they talk about honor, they talk about things like that. Pretty much no one mentions slaves. Okay? People in the North don't say they're fighting to free the slaves. It doesn't even become a goal of the North until about halfway through the war, okay? Until 1863. They don't talk about freeing the slaves. Okay? So for the South, it's a little bit more complicated. So we're going to watch some clips from the movie Gone with the Wind. Okay? And Gone with the Wind is a movie that's based about, or talks about Southern plantation lifestyle. And it's made well after the Civil War. Okay? So the things I want you to notice in the clips we're going to watch is what is their lifestyle